the idea was I was at this end of the foolery story, and the early 1980s, this is before fooleries, I had a visitor, his name was Venki Venkatesan, who was another guy from India. I don't know if you remember that. And he made me laugh, and his main interest was small numbers of atoms in clusters, what behavior, and he wrote his PhD thesis at Bell Labs. They had his thesis wherever, and I was part of that whole project. And the early work was how big cluster you could make. So we got together at that time about C15. And 15. And then what we did was we gave more. We had a higher energy collision between the carbon atoms, and what happened was that we found we were getting much higher clusters, much larger clusters, because we had a rod from which we were emitting the carbon atoms, and when they disappeared more rapidly, and we could measure how much came off each time we collected debris, and so it had to be much larger clusters that was known at that time. So it had to be bigger than. At that time, I guess not enough to 15 years ago. And there were two centers that were doing this thing. I think they were both in industrial labs, so I got a chance to visit industry, find out what they were doing. What could it be? I was invited, I think, next to conference. And that gave me the idea that maybe what I was seeing is these fullerenes. Well, fullerenes were discovered in 1985 by Rick Smalley. I wasn't the discoverer of the fullerenes. That required the mass spec technique, and that's what he did. But we were in touch with each other, and he didn't have much explanation for what I was seeing. But we started to study fullerenes and clusters. So that was the time when, in the 1980s. And we had so much data, I didn't know what to do with it, so we wrote a book on it. And because Peter Eklund was around at that time, and he convinced me that I should explain it to people because it was so complex. Because we had over 200 different kinds of clusters that could form, and they had all different symmetry, and we had information from the Raman spectra and IR spectra what some of the symmetries were, so we could get some explanation of the various clusters form. I think I have a picture. No, it's a picture of a different book. So let me tell you about this book. This is the book on graphite fibers, and this is the book that I wrote for this DoD sponsor, and they asked me to study what happens with these very light filaments that could be made, and they call them fibers. The idea was, could you do something with these filaments and make the filaments were, they were nano-sized diameter, many smaller than nano-sized diameter. People at that time didn't know how to measure what the diameters were. We didn't have a microscopy that we have today. And so I was busy with that. And this practical book that was, I guess, motivated by the Japanese. I'm not sure that they participated much in writing the book, but they got us interested in fibers, and I was working with fibers. I bring up fibers because fibers were very important in getting invited to a certain conference that started my whole career in nanoscience as we know it today. I was invited to give a talk about the fibers, and the other invited speaker was Rick Smalley. And Rick Smalley had a very simple system, and that was the C60. Bicarbon fibers were very interesting to the military for spacecraft and getting lighter airplanes, because they were using these fibers to build framework planes. So that was a kind of a public service kind of work. I started out doing it for public service, and maybe looking around a little bit for science, so the students were happy as well. But through this fiber, I got to know Endo Sensei in Japan, and we developed a lifelong collaboration. I'm still working with him on various things. Various students of mine know about Endo Sensei in Japan. Being invited to this conference, and Smalley also being invited to the conference, and we were the two invited speakers, and they put us on the stage for question and answers at the end of the talks, and two contributed talks. It was the end of the day, and somebody asked, what is the connection between fibers and C60? And we knew about C70, well, keep stretching out C70, and maybe you can make a fiber. What would it be like? It would be a single wall nanotube. So this was dreamt of, and it was a dream. And I would say that in his later years, Smalley was very, very much interested in this, and was working on making carbon fibers for atom thick, single wall nanotubes, as we call them today. We didn't have a name at that time for it. So early literature is kind of lost because you won't find it as a modern name. But we were working on this independently and together, and that gave the idea to try to engineer these nanotubes. Actually, Endo Sensei has a paper that's published in the Japanese literature going back to 1976, where he actually has a paper on single wall nanotube, but he doesn't have a name for it at the time that we recognize today. But we can look back at that old manuscript and see what we found. But when we met, so we started doing spectroscopy, and that helped a lot with the understanding of what we saw. So the spec lab with Ramachandra there helping us was very helpful. And I don't know if you remember when we were doing that experiment, but that was first single wall. When I show you the people, you will never forget it about that period. So the real explanation of it came about when we had a visit from two very young Japanese physicists. After 3 years or so, at that time, they gave Japanese physicists, faculty members, they gave them a leave of absence for a year to go abroad and see and learn things that were going on in other countries. And so I had these two people from Japan, both about the same age. They didn't know each other. They met in my lab. And I asked them this question: if we made a single wall nanotube, we know how to do this now, but we can make these in the laboratory. But we know how to make it in theory, but not actually. nobody had made it yet, under any controlled conditions. And would it be interesting? And that's when we came up with this model that changed our idea that this could be very interesting. So here's a single sheet carbon atom, roll it up, and you can see that you can connect the two sides nicely. They fit one inside the other, and then you get a tube, a seamless tube. And later on in the laboratory, that actually is formed as a seamless tube. And there are many possibilities with the tubes. At that time, when we came up with the idea, explanation, so we had done the electronic structure of graphite. Remember, that's the 1960s work published on it. It was a long time. And so we knew what the constant energy surfaces were, and we had these points. And so the idea is we could do some intersection. And when we got down to we have holes, right, this side, and when they joined, we had intersection. So depending on the circles that were made here, where these cutting lines for the nanotubes occurred, they could occur anywhere along here, and the number of points had to do with the diameters that we were going to make. So you can see that if they intersected like this, we'd have metallic tubes, otherwise we'd have semiconductor tubes. And in fact, 1/3 would be metallic and 2/3 would be semiconductors. Everybody knows that nowadays, but at the time, this is another contentious point with the referees that we had to go back and forth to convince them that there would be 3 possibilities and then we alternate. And then we had this, after we published work, we had this diagram showing that it would be very high density of states at a certain energy values, and depending on what these diameters were. So this is a very important paper that we did, and the measurements that resulted from this in your laboratory was this result. And A.M. Rao should be around somewhere. I don't know if he's in the room. Yeah, he's right there. This was, I guess, his thesis work under the supervision of Peter Eklund, and we were involved with this as collaborators with him. And this opened up the whole field of Raman spectroscopy for nanotubes. And the explanation was also in this paper, and how you can get the chirality and the separation between the distinction of one tube and another. All of that was in this paper. It's a very heavily cited paper because it's really the beginning of the nanotube business. Maybe a little hard to find because I'm not sure that we had the name nanotubes in that paper yet. But the predecessor of that, it started in 1994, was the very first work. It's preliminary, and we published something to see what people would say about it. But it was this 1997 paper that was the real paper in a real journal, and it wasn't published 1990. So it got lots of citations about the field, and still is referred to. And the interesting point of this is, if you have a spectra, it should be independent of the, if you have ordinary Raman spectra, it should not depend on the excitation energy, it's just the vibration. But in this case, we have resonance, so we have a condition for a large amplification factor. And we have last year's winner Raman sitting in front of us between the night. And so she taught us later much more about this, but at the time we did this experiment, we didn't know what we know today. So this opened up the imaging field for us, and we started, yes, the next experiment is this one, and this came from what I should go back to the last one. I remember giving an MOS seminar and reporting this work, and I had quite a lot of people coming in like today. And they were interested because we had seen Raman spectra that were very unusual for Raman spectra, with intensities and even short frequency differences were all dependent on laser excitation energy. And in the lab, we had many different lasers that were accessible, so we could be easily done in the laboratory. So this was important for the field, but it was also important for me because I had the question from Virginia tonight that opened the next phase of this work. I don't know if you remember, you asked a really innocent question to me. If you have such a large amplification factor, would it be possible to see a single nanotube? So I said, well, I don't know, but let's try. I remember my answer. And so she came around the lab visiting at that time, and we tried the experiment. And so this is what happened, basically. This is the next phase of it. Charlie Lieber at Harvard University made a nice sample for us. And he had a chemistry lab, and his experience worked with nanotubes. And one of his students spread out the nanotubes on a surface, and we were able to, I think it was a silicon surface, and any surface at that time we worked with this. And with a microscope, we could pick out which nanotube we wanted. Nanotubes are kind of visible under a microscope because they have a high aspect ratio, so you could find them and pick which one you like. And by the location, we figured out a way to chart, label where the location, XY coordinates. I think you helped us with that, Shama, a long time ago. Do that. I don't know if you remember this, but because we taught this to many people, they came around, they wanted to know how to find nanotube, how to find a nanostructure on a substrate. So you make markers and you label X and Y directions, and you go looking for it. And lo and behold, we had two different kinds of spectra. We had some spectra that were metallic light, and those semiconductor you compare. So this is the G-band. The G-band is two carbon atoms vibrating like this, and they were very, very different in metallic and semiconductor tubes because of the background of plasma and carbon that the vibrations like themselves. And so we did some theoretical work on that as well. And then we have G prime band, it's called 2D now, which occurs at the second order of the D band, which is this one here, which is defect reduced defect. That's the name we gave it, that has remained with it over time. And so the harmonic, first harmonic in G prime, and we named it G prime because it's allowed. So G for gravity, you always find it. But now people call it the 2D band. We thought that D should be reserved for defects of different kinds, first order, second order. But that's not the notation that people use now. That's right. That is, the D band should be disorder, forbidden transition. Second order is allowed by symmetry. So they have different, from a group theory standpoint, they're not the notation doesn't make too much sense as we use it today. But the important thing is that the difference between semiconductors and metal. And close attention was given to this radio reading mode, which was identified in the very first paper on Raman spectrum. So you would see that's also different. And that gave us a way to determine what the diameter would be to pretty high accuracy, and it's still used today as then that's spectrum. Now, the wonderful thing about spectroscopy is you don't have to touch the sample. You know? The sample's the same, bring it back the next day, you look at it. At least with nanotubes, it works that way. But with some systems, the radiation changes the sample somewhat, and then you have to worry about that also. So that means that you have to use appropriate values of intensity spectroscopy, and I think you taught us a lot about that from not too much. Don't use more intensity than you need. I think that was the piece to say to the students. That's the very good advice. So, and now this is putting the whole thing together, and you can see that of the bundles and the individual tube, they're related. They look a lot similar, but there are many differences that you can see in the details. And that gives you some idea about the interaction. So from there, follow lots of work on the interaction two tubes with each other at the nanoscale, especially when they're packed at the closest distance, which they like to do. So now, that's kind of what I have to say about work done with Ramachandra in the lab. And now I move to the big picture, the red part here, is how all of this work fits into our decade of nanoscience. I would say that the early work done with Ramachandra laid the grounds for the standards that we use today in many aspects of spectroscopy today. Carbon systems, they only have one atom. The crystal structure is very simple, and any student can learn that in an elementary course. And the fact that it can be a standard is very valuable for many things. And if you have a substrate that's not too invasive, like hexagonal boron nitride, which is very similar to carbon, but has a huge band gap. So it's turned out to be as good a substrate as the substrate can be. Of course, having empty spaces may be better, but it's hard to really suspend something that's so small, thin, and fragile, and recover it to make further experiment. So I would say that carbon as a metrological tool for nanoscience has been really important, and led me to think about making some comments about the big picture, and I'm going to go through that in rapid order very quickly. So you all know, this audience doesn't have to be told about nanoscience, but when I started working in the lab with Ramachandra, we were up in here because we hadn't really entered the nano world yet. But very shortly after you came and we started some of these spectroscopic works, we did enter into the nano world, and because we had the tools that we were enabled by the lab and your help, we were able to get all kinds of results that were interesting for the world. And 10 years ago, I was asked to head up a national study. So I guess that 2007 is when we finished the study, so that's roughly minus 8 years ago. And items that we identified as being important. And the complex phenomenon, that's a collection of the electron gas, two-dimensional electron gas, for example, of complex phenomenon. You take a certain electron, electrons in a two-dimensional gas, they're not the same exactly, and the differences have to do with many body effects. And spectroscopically, you can study that sort of thing and many things about it. And in carbon, it's the simplest system to study it. But what we like to do is study just the many more complex systems that we worry about today, two-dimensional, three-dimensional, one-dimensional. All of those things can be studied very nicely in spectroscopy. And I'm not talking about that today because that's not really on the agenda for Robert Scheimer's influence on the early foundations of the field. But so we have the physics of light, in equilibrium, out of equilibrium, and what's the difference, and how do we study that in detail, and how do we extract energy in an efficient way without damage to our environment. Information technologies. I get many calls to talk about that because we've got gas smaller than the 10 nanometer limit, which Moore's law sort of reaches a very interesting end, or where you're at Moore's law. And this is the discoveries of the nano world. And so I have a bunch of graphs about that, but I would say that all the things that we learned about standards and simple systems, I think has been a very big help. And what our students today in our group are doing, and many people in the audience are here in the nano world and studying details. And we need standards because when you put transition metal like cogenite, phosphorine, all these fancy things that we do nowadays, we really need some simple standards that we can compare our results to. And all of those new things that we're doing now are both interesting and shows us that Moore's law only brings more things to do. I believe that we have more different things going on now in our various fields, chemistry, physics, biophysics, all of the people that are here. We're going into more directions than ever because we're questioning what we should be doing, and that leads to new material systems and new physical phenomena. Both directions. And it's a good thing that we had some time to establish some standards, so we have some ways to go back and forth and revise what we learned. I would say one other thing. When I was a graduate student, I was very much under the influence of Enrico Fermi, who was a professor at the University of Chicago when I was a graduate student. And what he taught us